It started with a sound no Londoner ever expects to hear echoing from the gates of Buckingham Palace. The low, thunderous growl of an armored vehicle rolling across historic stone. Tourists froze. Royal guards shifted their stance. Even the birds circling above seemed to silence themselves. What could possibly require military-grade protection inside the most secure residence in Britain? And when the rear doors finally opened, what emerged didn't just shock the crowd. It left an entire nation breathless. Before we dive into this extraordinary chain of events, the kind that rewrote royal protocol and revealed a side of the monarchy few ever see, make sure to hit like, subscribe, and share this video. It helps more people discover these deep, emotional royal stories. And trust me, you'll want to stay until the end. This one stays with you. IT began on a morning so ordinary that no one could predict it would be remembered for decades. Buckingham Palace was wrapped in its usual early glow, the kind that softens the stone walls and paints the gates gold. Tourists lined up in quiet excitement. Royal guards held their posts with that impeccable stillness only years of training can perfect, and the slow hum of London traffic rolled through the distance like a familiar heartbeat. And then the air changed. It wasn't a sound at first. It was a feeling, a subtle tightening, as if the atmosphere itself sensed something about to arrive. A few guards exchanged glances, tiny flickers of instinct from men trained to detect the unusual. One guard, a young man named Corporal James Winton, later said it felt like the moment before a storm breaks, except the sky was clear. And then the sound came, a deep mechanical growl, low and heavy, crawling up the mall from somewhere beyond the Victoria Memorial. Not fast, not rushed, but deliberate, purposeful. The kind of machine noise you don't associate with peace or ceremony, but with conflict, with urgency, with things that need protection. People started turning their heads. Cameras raised. A few children stepped closer to their parents. Even the pigeons crowding the fence scattered, as if they understood something important was on its way. The first silhouette appeared beyond the gates, massive, angular, unmistakably armored. Not police, not ceremonial. This was military, the sort of vehicle usually seen rolling through war zones, not gliding into the front courtyard of a monarch's home. A reinforced tactical transport, matte black, shielded windows, thick tires built for resilience, not display. The guards instinctively tightened their formation, boots shifting in perfect synchronization. The crowd rippled with whispers, confusion spreading like a breeze. This wasn't scheduled. Nothing like this ever came to the palace gates without the world already knowing. The vehicle approached slowly, each rotation of its tires echoing off the palace walls. There was no siren, no flashing light, just pure brute presence, as if the metal itself carried a secret. Inside the palace, staff paused mid-task. Footmen stopped by doorways. A housemaid froze while polishing a silver tray. A private secretary leaned over a balcony, brows drawn tight. The palace, usually a vast ecosystem of coordinated motion, fell into a rare hush. Corporal Winton swallowed hard. In his training, he'd been told to expect anything, but not this. State-level emergency vehicles, they'd said, only appear without notice if the matter concerns the crown directly. And if it concerns the crown directly, it means one thing. Something extraordinary has happened. The armored vehicle reached the courtyard center and stopped. A puff of air hissed from its brakes. For several seconds, nothing moved. Not the guards, not the tourists, not even people inside the palace watching through tall windows. That stillness, it was suffocating. A locked door on the back of the vehicle unlatched. The heavy metal arm shifted. A steel ramp descended with metallic moan that scraped through the silence and raised goosebumps along every spine present. The tension was unbearable. What could require military-level protection inside Buckingham Palace? What was so valuable or so dangerous that it needed to be escorted in armored steel? A young girl in the crowd tugged on her mother's sleeve. "Mom, is the king in danger?" But the mother had no answer. Two military officers stepped out first, tall, stern, visibly alert. Both wore expressions that left no room for doubt. Whatever they were about to reveal was not ordinary cargo. One officer scanned the area with a gaze sharp enough to cut glass, as if mapping every potential threat. The other held a clipboard pressed tightly to his chest, knuckles draining of color. Then they turned toward the vehicle's interior and signaled. A moment later, more soldiers emerged, carrying a long, reinforced container, silver, sealed, marked with security code and a crest that made several staff members gasp. Not the royal arms, but the crest used only for classified crown assets. The crowd leaned in. A few phones dropped from trembling hands, because Buckingham Palace had not seen that symbol in public view for almost 2 decades. Inside the palace, an advisor whispered urgently into a radio. "It's confirmed. They're bringing it in now." His voice cracked, a tiny, unhidden tremor of fear or awe. The soldiers moved in perfect synchrony, lifting the container with reverence and tension, balancing its weight as if what lay inside could not afford even the slightest tilt. The guards flanking the courtyard didn't break formation, but their eyes traced the container every inch of the way. And here's the strange thing. No one could tell whether the soldiers were protecting it or protecting everyone else from it. The crowd murmured louder. A tourist, perhaps without thinking, muttered, "Is it a weapon?" A royal guard overheard and responded under his breath, "If it were, we'd all be somewhere else." But he couldn't hide the way his voice wavered. The soldiers began the slow walk toward the grand entrance. Staff pushed open the towering double doors, their hands shaking just slightly. Even the palace's iconic marble floor seemed to echo more sharply as the container crossed its threshold, as if acknowledging the gravity of what was entering. Once inside, an immediate ripple spread through the palace halls. Footsteps hurried. Radio static burst with coded messages. A senior advisor urgently repeated one phrase, "Notify the prince." Immediately, Prince William had been in a briefing room only moments earlier, discussing routine security matters. Nothing out of the ordinary. But when the knock came at the door, the look on his aide's face told him everything. Something bigger than protocol, bigger than routine. Something that would require not just a future king, but a steady human being ready to face a truth he'd never been prepared for. Behind him, a portrait of Queen Elizabeth II watched silently, a reminder of legacy, stability, and the weight of the crown. William took a breath, slow and steady, before stepping out, because whatever had just been delivered under armored escort now belonged in his hands. And deep inside Buckingham Palace, soldiers placed a sealed container onto a guarded table, unlocking its outer restraints one by one. Every click of metal sounded like a countdown. No one present, not the military officers, not the palace staff, not even the royal guard standing at the ready, could predict how much Britain was about to change. And as the final latch released with a sharp metallic snap, a chill ran through the room. Whatever was inside was ready to be seen. The lid lifted with a slow metallic sigh, like the exhale of something ancient waking after a long sleep. The room seemed to lean forward, every breath held, every heartbeat suddenly louder. Prince William stepped closer, his expression controlled but sharpened by instinct. He had seen classified briefings before, he had attended emergency security meetings, but nothing in his 30-plus years as a royal had prepared him for this. Inside the container lay a smaller case, obsidian black, smooth, with its own embedded biometric lock. The light above it flickered slightly, casting a cold sheen across the polished surface. It was almost too pristine, too deliberate, as if it had been crafted for a moment exactly like this. The commanding officer cleared his throat, speaking with the tone of a man carrying a truth too heavy to soften. "Your Royal Highness." This was recovered at 0430 hours. Classified level Omega, ordered to be delivered directly to you and Her Royal Highness the Princess of Wales. William's jaw tightened. Omega-class cases were almost mythical, reserved only for threats or discoveries that could shift national security, royal history, or both. The kind of secrets buried deep beneath decades of protocol. The kind that live in vaults lined with steel. He nodded once. "Open it." A soldier stepped forward, pressed his palm against the biometric panel, then entered a sequence of codes. The lock clicked. The case slowly unfolded like a blooming metal flower, revealing a set of documents on one side and on the other. Something wrapped in deep crimson fabric. The officer's voice lowered. "This is the item recovered." William stared at the object, at the strange sense of age and weight radiating from it. It wasn't a weapon. It wasn't a device. It wasn't something technological or dangerous in any modern sense. It was symbolic. A small gasp left one of the advisors. Another covered her mouth. Even the soldiers shifted subtly, realizing they were witnessing history rather than threat. Because wrapped inside that royal crimson cloth was a crown. But not just any crown. An old crown. A forgotten crown. One that hadn't been seen in public since the early 1900s. The crown of Queen Alexandra. Believed lost, rumored destroyed. A relic of royal transformation during a time of profound change. Generations had speculated about its disappearance. Some whispered it had been intentionally hidden. Others believed it was stolen. But here it was, in a military container, delivered under armored escort. William reached out slowly, fingertips brushing the velvet before he lifted it. It was breathtaking. The diamonds, though dull by age, still caught the light in quiet shards of silver. The gold framework held tiny inscriptions along the interior rim, messages carved by a queen to her successor, messages no living monarch had ever read. One advisor choked out, "How is this possible?" The officer explained, his voice steady but strained. It was found during a covert operation beneath an estate once owned by a high-ranking royal aide from the early 20th century. We believe he removed it illegally, possibly convinced it held political value. The estate was recently purchased by a private developer. They broke ground at dawn and discovered a sealed subroom filled with items believed lost from the royal collection. William looked stunned, but not by the discovery alone. It was the timing. Why now? Why this crown? Why in this way? Why the armored escort? He asked quietly. The officer hesitated. Because the crown wasn't the only thing recovered. Every person in the room stiffened. The officer motioned to a second, smaller lockbox still inside the container. It was dull gray, reinforced, with a seal that made William's skin prickle. Classified, personal to the late Princess Diana. The air collapsed into silence. A silence so thick it felt like the room itself stopped breathing. William's lips parted just slightly. For a moment, his royal composure faltered, replaced by something raw. The quiet, human ache of a son. The officers respectfully lowered their eyes, giving him a sliver of privacy in a moment where privacy didn't truly exist. He stepped forward. His voice was barely above a whisper. "Open it." But the officer lifted a hand. "Sir, this requires authorization from both you and the Princess of Wales." William paused. Kate, she needed to be here. She needed to see this. He closed the box gently, as though touching something sacred, and whispered to an aide, "Bring her, now." Within minutes, the corridors carried a new energy, urgency wrapped in disbelief. And then Kate entered the room, grace shadowed by quiet concern. She took William's hand instinctively when she saw the object resting on the table. The crown. She whispered, "Is that?" William nodded. His expression softened for the first time since the armored vehicle arrived. "Yes, and there's more." When Kate's eyes slid to the sealed lockbox, she inhaled sharply. She understood instantly. They both did. Together, they placed their hands on the biometric panel. The lock disengaged. Slowly, deliberately, the lid lifted. Inside was a single item resting atop a folded letter. An object so simple, so intimate, and yet so devastating in meaning that Kate pressed her other hand to her chest. A bracelet. Princess Diana's bracelet. One she wore in countless photographs. One given to her by her father. One believed lost after her passing. Kate felt tears build. William exhaled shakily. The sound of memory pulling a forgotten door open inside him. And then Kate noticed the letter. With trembling hands, she lifted it. The paper was fragile, aged but preserved. The handwriting unmistakable. Diana's. William steadied her hand as she unfolded it. It wasn't long. It wasn't official. It wasn't political. It was a message written to a future daughter-in-law, dated only weeks before Diana's passing. Kate whispered the first line aloud. "I don't know who you are yet, but I pray you will be loved, protected, and seen for the woman you are." William's breath hitched. Kate's voice broke. The room fell completely still. The military officers, the advisors, even the guards who had followed protocol to the letter now bowed their heads, touched by the weight of a mother's words carried through time. And then came the final lines of the letter, words that would echo across the country once revealed. The crown is heavy. Love him gently when he falters. Stand beside him when the world feels loud. And please, tell our boys I am always with them. Kate pressed the letter to her heart. William looked away, eyes glistening. The armored vehicle didn't bring a threat. It brought closure, legacy, a message from the woman who shaped modern royalty. A message meant for the family she never got to see grow. And as William whispered, "Mom," the room realized the truth. Bryn would never forget this day. For a long moment after Diana's letter was read, no one in the room moved. The silence that wrapped around Buckingham Palace felt almost soft, almost sacred, as though the air itself was holding its breath for William and Kate. Every person present understood that this was not simply a discovery. It was an emotional earthquake. A letter written nearly 3 decades ago had somehow found its way into the hands of the woman it was meant for, and the son who had lived with its absence. Kate wiped her cheek with the back of her hand, doing it quietly, the way she always handled emotion in public. William's grip on the edge of the table tightened, his knuckles whitening as his mother's handwriting seemed to glow under the soft palace lights. There were moments in every royal's life when heritage felt heavy, but nothing like this. And yet, beneath the emotion, something else was beginning to ripple through the room. Responsibility. Because relics like these, a lost crown, a personal letter, a bracelet, weren't just sentimental items. They were dynamite. The kind of revelations that could rewrite public sentiment, destabilize narratives, stir old controversies, and breathe new life into stories the monarchy had tried to quietly let rest. And that meant one thing. The decision about what to do next would fall on William and Kate alone. Kate inhaled deeply, steadying herself, her voice soft but sure. What are they asking of us, exactly? The lead advisor stepped forward, uncomfortable in the presence of such raw emotion. Your Royal Highness, the Prime Minister has been informed. So have the heads of security. They're awaiting your decision before we confirm anything public. William lifted the bracelet, rolling it gently between his fingers as though touching a memory. And the crown? Its recovery will raise questions, accusations, speculation. That's unavoidable. The advisor nodded. Yes, sir. Kate looked at her husband, reading every shift in his expression. No one could understand the pressure of the monarchy except him, but she understood him. What are you thinking? She asked quietly. William took a moment before answering. That this is bigger than us, bigger than the crown. This is my mother, and this is part of her story that was stolen. His voice softened into something more vulnerable, and now it's been placed in our hands. He placed the bracelet back into the box with care. We can't hide it. We can't bury it. That would be repeating history, the very thing Mum fought against. Kate nodded slowly. She understood. Diana had been a woman who wanted truth, honesty, humanity. William had inherited that part of her spirit. If they hid something so personal, so powerful, it would go against everything he believed a modern monarchy should be. But she also saw the other side, the weight of it. William, if we release this, the world will talk about her again. They'll analyze it, debate it, twist it. Are you ready for that? Are the boys ready? This question lingered heavily. For Prince George, Princess Charlotte, and Prince Louis, Diana wasn't a scandal or a headline or a historic figure. She was a grandmother they never got to meet, the one whose photo still sat in a quiet corner of their home, the one William spoke about with warmth and ache in equal measure. William's eyes softened. I want them to know her, the real her, not the version books and tabloids wrote. And this is her voice. He lifted the letter again, tracing the curve of his mother's handwriting. She wrote this for you, and for them long before she knew your names. How could we keep that locked away? Kate felt the truth in his words settle deep within her. She reached for his hand. Then we share it, but we do it with dignity, on our terms, not sensationalized, not weaponized. A message of love, nothing more. The advisors glanced at one another with quiet relief. The monarchy had evolved because William and Kate had always chosen empathy over spectacle, humanity over protocol. Their decision felt right, real, but one concern remained. The officer who delivered the items cleared his throat. "There's something else, something we must consider." William turned. "What is it?" The officer hesitated, just briefly. During the recovery of the crown and the lockbox, there was evidence that someone else had been looking for these items. Recent disruption, fresh markings, a broken chain of custody we can't fully account for. Kate felt a chill run down her spine. "So someone knew they were there?" "Yes, Your Royal Highness. Or at least suspected." William's posture shifted, protective instinct rising. "Do we know who?" "Not yet, but we're investigating. This could have been intercepted, stolen again, or misused, which means releasing this publicly carries risk." He paused, letting the implications settle. Some may not want the truth resurfacing. William exchanged a look with Kate, a silent understanding passing between them. Being royal meant walking a constant tightrope between public truth and hidden danger. Kate stepped closer to the table, steadying herself. "Keeping it hidden won't make us safer. It will just make whoever is interested in it more desperate. Transparency is our protection." William nodded. We moved forward, but quietly, carefully, a controlled announcement. No sensationalism. The advisors scribbled notes. Plans began forming. Protocols reactivated. But Kate wasn't finished. She lifted the crown, Queen Alexandra's lost crown, holding it gently in her hands. This isn't just a discovery. It's a reminder of how much gets lost in the shadows of history. Women who came before us, their stories were often buried, their voices overlooked. She looked at William, her gaze steady. "And your mother refused to be silent. She fought to be seen. I think she wants this crown returned not as a symbol of power, but as a symbol of truth." William's throat tightened. "You're right." He stepped closer, brushing his fingers across the crown's edge. "This isn't about the monarchy reclaiming something. It's about giving back what should never have been lost." A gentle knock at the door broke the moment. It was George, still in his school jumper, cheeks slightly flushed from running. He looked small against the high ceilings, a child in a palace built for giants. "Dad," he asked softly. "Mum, they said you needed us." William's heart squeezed. He walked to his son, kneeling so their eyes met. "There's something we want to show you." George's gaze drifted to the open cases, one shining, one quiet and personal. He whispered, "Is that Grandma Diana's?" Kate's voice warmed. "Yes, sweetheart. Something very special of hers has come home." George stepped forward cautiously, as though afraid to breathe on the sacredness before him. William placed a gentle hand on his shoulder. "We're going to tell the world about this. Together, as a family." George nodded, his expression shifting with maturity surprising for his age, a glimpse of the future king he would one day become. Kate rested her hand on the letter. "And when they hear it, they'll hear her heart, not her headlines." A soft hush settled over the room once again. The crown, the bracelet, the letter, a family rediscovering its history and deciding together how to honor it. The impossible decision had been made, but the world had not yet heard the truth. And when it did, Britain would not be the same. News rarely moves across London in absolute silence. But on the morning the royal household announced an unexpected live address from Prince William and Princess Kate. With no explanation, no lead-up, no leak hint, the city felt as if it were bracing for something unprecedented. Even seasoned reporters who had covered decades of royal events admitted the air felt different. Heavier, charged, as though history had already taken its seat and was waiting for the curtain to rise. Crowds gathered outside Buckingham Palace hours before the broadcast. Some arrived wrapped in Union Jack flags, others carrying old photographs of Diana, snapshots from a different era, a different monarchy, a different world. People whispered theories, some wild, some heartfelt, some fearful, but no one guessed the truth. No one imagined the emotional avalanche waiting behind the palace walls. Inside, William stood beside Kate in a quiet room prepared for the broadcast. Not the grand ballroom, Not the throne room, a smaller, warmer space, chosen deliberately, a room where they could speak not as symbols, but as people. The crown recovered from the armored vehicle rested in a display case behind them, not highlighted, not dramatized, simply present. And on a small velvet pad between them lay the bracelet and the letter from Diana. Kate straightened William's jacket gently. "Ready?" she whispered. He gave a small nod, but his eyes said otherwise. "You don't prepare to speak your mother's words to the world. You simply try to breathe through it." The broadcast light went red. William began. His voice was steady, but there was something softer beneath it, a tone the public rarely heard. "Good evening. Today, something extraordinary happened within the walls of this palace. Something we never expected, never imagined, and never believed we would have the privilege to share." Kate continued, her expression warm but touched with emotion. "This morning, items belonging to Queen Alexandra and to Diana, Princess of Wales, were recovered and returned to the royal household under the highest level of security. Cameras across the world zoomed in. Phones trembled in people's hands. Social media flooded with disbelief. William stepped slightly closer to the table, placing a hand beside the letter. Among these items was a message, a private message written by my mother, addressed to a future daughter-in-law she never had the chance to meet. He paused, a tiny crack in his breath. Not dramatic. Human. Kate reached for the letter, her voice gentle but clear. With William's blessing, I will read a portion of her message tonight, because it is not only a family moment. It is a reminder of who she was and of the love she carried for the people she cared about. Around Britain, living rooms fell silent. Pubs muted their televisions. Elderly women clutched tissues. Even those who had never followed royal affairs felt a sudden need to listen. Kate unfolded the letter carefully, almost reverently, and then she read, I don't know who you are yet, but I pray you will be loved, protected, and seen for the woman you are. Gasps rippled through the crowd outside the palace. A woman whispered, Oh, Diana, as tears rolled down her cheeks. Kate looked up briefly, gathering herself. The crown is heavy. Love him gently when he falters. Stand beside him when the world feels loud. And please, tell our boys I am always with them. The words landed like a soft blow, tender, but powerful enough to break open years of quiet grief across an entire nation. The camera captured the moment William blinked hard, fighting the ache rising behind his composure. He stepped forward again, his voice quieter now. My mother believed in transparency and compassion, and in the idea that the monarchy should serve not just through duty, but through humanity. Today we honor that belief. He motioned subtly toward the recovered crown. The lost crown of Queen Alexandra has been returned to its rightful place. It represents a part of our history long buried and now restored. Then his hand moved to the bracelet. But this is different. This was hers. This is personal. And I want you to know that its return means more to us than simple heritage. It means connection, memory, a bridge between past and future. Across the UK, people sobbed in cars, in kitchens, on trains. Not because the monarchy had spoken, but because, for the first time in a long time, it felt human again. Kate took William's hand, and together they addressed the closing lines. We share this today, Kate said, not as a royal announcement, but as a family sharing a piece of their heart. And to those who loved her, remembered her, and carried her memory all these years, William added, thank you. Today, her voice reaches all of us again. The broadcast ended, but the moment didn't. Outside the palace, the crowd erupted, not in cheers, not in celebration, but in a wave of emotional applause. Gentle, respectful, united, a sound that felt like Britain placing both hands over its heart. People hugged strangers. Journalists wiped their eyes on live television. Social media flooded with millions of tributes, photos, quotes, and memories of Diana, the woman who had changed the monarchy with kindness instead of power. Inside the palace, William let out a long breath, shoulders sagging with a mix of release and exhaustion. Kate squeezed his hand. She'd be proud of you, she whispered. He looked down at the bracelet, the diamonds catching the light like tiny echoes of the past. "I hope so," he said softly. "I really hope so." But the night wasn't over, because as the royal couple left the broadcast room, a senior security officer approached them with urgency written across his face. "Your Royal Highness, I'm afraid there's more." Kate and William exchanged a wary glance. "What is it?" William asked. The officer hesitated. The recovered site, it wasn't the only location marked on the old aides documents. He swallowed. "There are two more." Kate's eyes widened. "And one of them," the officer continued, lowering his voice, "is beneath a property long believed to contain a sealed, undocumented royal archive." William felt the ground shift under him. Another archive. More hidden items. More long-buried truth. The world had cried tonight, but the story was far from over. From the moment the armored vehicle rolled past the gates of Buckingham Palace, the world had been waiting for a reason, an explanation, something that made sense of the tension hanging in the London air. But no one, not even the royal guards who dedicated their lives to stillness, expected what was about to unfold on that cold, silver-blue morning. As the tank-like vehicle came to a halt beside the palace's stone steps, the camera zoomed in. The sounds of reporters hushed, almost as if the entire world collectively held its breath. A strange kind of silence fell, the kind that only appears right before history changes direction. The rear hatch lowered, and everything shifted. What slid into view wasn't a weapon, nor a classified artifact, nor any kind of high-security intelligence device. No, what emerged was something warmer, something that pulled an immediate gasp out of the crowd. A cradle, a soft white cradle, covered in layers of protective glass, guarded on all sides by elite soldiers wearing expressions that weren't stern, but unexpectedly tender. Inside that cradle was a newborn, tiny, peaceful, wrapped in royal blue silk. A baby who carried a secret that Britain was never supposed to discover in this manner. The child of Prince William and Princess Catherine. The child whose birth had been kept secret for one reason: safety. And now the nation finally understood why the escort had been so extreme. Because this wasn't an ordinary birth. This was an emergency. As the soldiers formed a human shield around the cradle, the king himself appeared at the palace entrance. King Charles III, usually calm, poised, measured, looked visibly shaken. Not frightened, but emotional in a way that caught even the oldest royal correspondents off guard. His eyes glistened. His jaw trembled. He didn't walk down the steps. He rushed, almost stumbling. For a moment, it didn't matter that he was the monarch. He wasn't a ruler in that instant. He was a grandfather sprinting toward his grandchild. Just behind him, Queen Camilla followed, her hands clasped, her chin trembling the moment she saw the tiny bundle. She whispered something no one could hear. A prayer? A name? A plea? No one knew. No one dared guess. As the cradle was lifted out of the armored vehicle, two royal guards, members of the king's own company, snapped to attention. These men had stood through storms, protests, threats, decades of ceremony. Yet now, both seemed overwhelmed by the weight of what they were protecting. Not an heir, not a future king or queen, but vulnerable life they had carried across the city, like a treasure too precious to risk. This wasn't protocol. This was family. The real shock wasn't just a child. It was the truth that followed. A senior palace physician stepped forward and addressed the stunned press. There were complications, he said softly. Both mother and child faced unexpected danger. The armored escort was necessary. We could not risk anything or anyone reaching them first. The reporters froze. The crowd trembled. For a heartbeat, there was no Britain, only human fear. Then he continued, "Princess Catherine is stable. She is safe. And this child is healthy." It was as if someone had unclenched Britain's heart with their own hands. People cried. Strangers hugged. Soldiers who had stood rigid for hours closed their eyes in relief. London didn't cheer. It exhaled. A rare, unified exhale that could only come from a nation that had been unknowingly worried for far too long. But then something even more unexpected happened. As King Charles reached the cradle, he lifted the upper glass carefully, almost reverently. His hands weren't steady. This was a man who had delivered countless speeches, shaken millions of hands, commanded rooms, nations, and worlds. Yet he trembled in front of a sleeping infant. His face crumpled, and he kissed the baby's forehead. A slow, gentle, impossibly intimate kiss, the kind that parents fear giving, because they know they'll never forget the moment. For a second, the king forgot the cameras, forgot the critics, forgot the crown. He was simply Charles, a man who adored his family, a man who, in that one small gesture, sent a message louder than any public statement Britain had heard in years. Family comes first. Across the palace balcony, Princess Diana's portrait hung as always, serene, warm, watching. Some swore later that Charles glanced at the portrait with a look that said everything without a single word, a look full of memory, regret, love, and hope. Queen Camilla stood nearby, hands folded tightly. Some witnesses said her eyes flashed with something fierce, not jealousy, not bitterness, but a protective loyalty. She had stood beside Charles through storms that would have broken lesser people, and now she stood in the shadow of this impossible moment, guarding her husband's emotions as fiercely as the soldiers guarded the cradle. Then, in one of the most cinematic moments the modern royal era had ever seen, the royal guards, dressed in their iconic scarlet and bearskin hats, stepped forward in a perfect line. They presented arms, not in ceremony, but in salute. A salute not to a king, nor to a tradition, nor to a symbol, but to new life. A salute to the future. A salute to the family they had silently protected through threats no one would ever fully know. And the baby, as if sensing this, stirred. The smallest movement, the tiniest shift. Its hand slipped free from the silk blanket and opened, reaching blindly, softly, searching for warmth. Charles froze. Then he extended his finger, and the baby's hand curled around it. That was the moment the world broke. Not in fear, not in chaos, in love, in unity, in the strange, beautiful realization that even in a world full of tension, division, and noise, a single tiny grass could silence everything. Pictures of that moment spread instantly. Within minutes, social media turned from arguments to awe. Within an hour, crowds gathered outside Buckingham Palace chanting blessings, singing, waving flags. Within a day, newspapers around the world printed the same headline in different languages: "The baby who made Britain hold its breath." Later, palace officials confirmed it. The armored vehicle had only carried one thing: a miracle, a fragile new life carried to the heart of London, protected not just by soldiers and steel, but by the hopes of an entire country. And as the palace doors finally closed around the royal family, the world felt something it hadn't felt in a long time, a quiet sense of wonder, a reminder that even behind the gates of Buckingham Palace, behind the titles, the uniforms, the duty, there are hearts that beat, families that fear, and moments that bring a nation together. Sometimes, the greatest stories aren't about power or politics. They're about love. And the day Britain watched an armored vehicle roll out of the palace, only to reveal a sleeping child, will remain one of the most extraordinary stories the royal family has ever lived.